Hey there, welcome to the 9th episode of Open Floor. I'm Ali Mosallai.
And I'm Aryan Narayan.
And we're your hosts for Open Floor.
Before we begin, please follow us wherever you get your podcasts like Spotify, Overcast, and Apple Podcasts. A full list will be available at openfloor.me/listen.
Also, please check out our website at openfloor.me/home and follow us on Instagram at openfloorpodcast. Now, on to the episode. The COVID-19 pandemic has certainly uprooted our society and changed how many essential functions operate.
The elderly have been impacted quite hard, especially those who require special care, such as those who are living with dementia.
We'd like to put our focus on this forgotten group, especially at a time like this when our attention is needed the most.
We would like to welcome Lena Cassidy and Avery Cutler, who are the co-founders of the Lexington chapter of the Youth Movement Against Alzheimer's, to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Okay, so can you guys quickly describe what YMAA is for our listeners who may not know much about it already?
Sure. YMAA stands for the Youth Movement Against Alzheimer's. It's an initiative working to promote knowledge and understanding among youth about Alzheimer's.
Yeah, and our vision is to create a culture without stigma that embraces aging while helping those living with the disease. And our club is one of 42 chapters across America in universities and high schools.
Okay, so now let's start on a broader scale. So a lot of people may have heard of Alzheimer's and dementia, or may even have family members that live with one of these conditions. However, many people might be confused about the distinction between these two terms. So could you elaborate on what each of these terms mean and what the difference between them is?
Sure, yeah, that's a really important distinction to make. So, dementia is more of an umbrella term. It describes a decline in cognitive ability that is not a part of normal aging. So, that means it inhibits daily life, while Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. So, it's a specific disease. But other types of dementia, for example, vascular dementia, Lewy body, Parkinson's disease, and many more, they all fall under that umbrella of dementia. And half of adults over 85 are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and 5.5 million people live with the disease in the United States today.
So, Alzheimer's and other related illnesses are progressive, which means that they get worse as time passes. What symptoms do people living with Alzheimer's or other types of dementia exhibit, and how do these symptoms change as time passes?
Yeah, so Alzheimer's can begin in individuals around the age of 40, which is early onset dementia. And this is a pretty young age when you think about the types of memory loss that one normally associates with Alzheimer's. So at first, this can be shown by forgetting the names of small things like a spatula, or losing things, forgetting details of conversations. And these are all kind of like the first signs. And then as it develops, individuals can forget entire conversations, develop anger and anxiety. They can forget how to do daily activities such as brushing their teeth. And individuals can also have difficulty with language and can forget about loved ones. They also might become disoriented, get lost easily, or have poor judgment. And this can also become a safety problem if an individual is falling for a scam on their telephone and they give away important information. So one important detail here is that memories like music, art, and strong emotions are stored in a different part of the brain. So this is not as affected as the part of the brain that deals with the decision making. So therefore, it's really important to remember that the people you're talking with still have those same emotional abilities, and you want to make sure that they're always feeling good and they're not feeling like they need to stop talking and disassociate from society. So also the aging and the progression of dementia is different for all people. Some people won't develop it as quickly as others, and they can live with dementia that won't affect them as much as others for a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm. So now, although Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia are relatively unexplored, right? Research is beginning to explain how they may impact the brain. And so can you maybe explain some of the science behind how these diseases do their damage?
Yeah, so a lot of Alzheimer's, the cause of this is found in the neuron cells, and this is mostly in the brain and spinal cord. So that's basically in the body where this type of change occurs. And a lot of Alzheimer's can be genetic, and this is a cause of the buildup of gene mutations in the APP PSEN1 and PSEN2 genes. And the alterations of these genes causes amyloid beta peptide, which is a protein, to be produced in the brain without regulation. And these clump into plaques, and then this creates a blockage in the nerve cells. And as a result, there's a lot of stress in the endoplasmic reticulum and mitochondria, which makes it so that the nerve cell eventually dies. And then these connections throughout the nervous system are no longer forming, and this basically is what ends up causing a lot of these problems. And this is normally found in MRI scanning. So that is a way that you can tell if you're having this problem genetically.
Though there are no treatments that are available to stop or even slow the progression of Alzheimer's and dementia, this does not mean that there's nothing that we can do for those who are suffering with these illnesses. What options currently exist to care for those who suffer with these diseases?
Well, right off the bat, this reminds me of a really cool article that I found in the New York Times just last month about a new blood test discovery that could provide a simpler and cheaper, more widely available diagnosis for patients. So, there's very exciting discoveries being made about how to predict Alzheimer's, because if you're aware that you're at risk for the disease, you can take steps to strengthen your brain beforehand, and slow the progression. But once you actually have that diagnosis, once you have Alzheimer's, there's many options available. So you can be in home care, assisted living, memory care facilities, just to provide support and stimulation and brain activities for those with dementia. But going back to that, the blood test discovery, that's super important because people can do mental exercises, change their diet. They can even have certain exercise plans that will make them less likely to have severe dementia, or they can even delay the onset if they know they're going to have it earlier on in their life. So the options truly are widening currently because of these advances in science. So yeah, I'm definitely hopeful for the future of dementia. I definitely think it's getting better.
And also, there have been a lot of discoveries about the impact that music has on dementia. And like we mentioned earlier, the brain is organized in different ways. And sometimes what music can do is it can draw connections between the brain. So that has been used as a technique to create a lot of brain stimulation to help create more connections in your brain, which is really cool.
Additionally, it's very important to know how to handle the emotions of those in our lives who are living with a form of dementia. And so, how can we care for the emotional state of people who are living with dementia, and why is it something that we should be mindful of when thinking about how to care for someone that is living with dementia?
Yeah, so this is definitely something that's really important to consider and to think about. And as we mentioned before, people with Alzheimer's and dementia still feel emotions like everyone else. So if they associate doing an activity with feeling angry and having a lot of anxiety, they won't want to do that activity anymore. For example, there's an anecdote of a man who goes with he has Alzheimer's, he goes to a restaurant, and there the host or the waiter is not being very responsive, not giving him the time that he needs to make his decision. And then he goes back to his car. He goes, I'm never going out for dinner again. And I think that's something that's really important to consider, because one bad experience can really make it harder for these people to continue experiencing life as they would. Also, it's really important to note that communication, when we have normal communication, there's a lot quicker reaction time than a conversation with someone who has Alzheimer's or dementia, as it can take 20 seconds to process the conversation. And our conversations nowadays are very fast paced. So when you are having a conversation with someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, it's really important to remember not to interrupt, to avoid correcting and criticizing, and to be aware of your tone of voice and facial expressions. Also, it's a good idea to remember not to have conversations feel like a quiz. So you don't want to start a conversation by saying, do you remember when? But instead you could say something like, I remember when, but da, da, da. And that way they don't feel the pressure to recall something that they maybe don't.
Many people may underestimate the extent of the negative impacts that dementia brings to our communities. So, could you explain what makes it a significant issue and why people should be concerned about it?
Yeah, so I think the one of the most important things to remember is that this is not a normal part of aging, and a lot of people assume that this like extreme memory loss is something that's bound to happen, and it's not. So we need to remember that this needs to be diagnosed and it needs to be treated really seriously.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's sort of a an attitude around aging that you're just going to become forgetful and, not know where you are, and it's sort of a negative stereotype. And while slight forgetfulness definitely like increases, like mild forgetfulness increases as you age, um like dementia and Alzheimer's gets to a point where it's like really inhibiting your daily life. So that it's definitely not a normal part of aging, and many people age without experiencing the dementia at all. But I think the main, like, concern with, um, this issue is that there's, like, a huge stigma around aging that actually damages the cause. In American society, aging is pretty much frowned upon. I mean, it has a negative connotation. People actively try to combat, like, signs of aging, like cosmetic, like, signs of aging. But if you look at a place like Japan, where pretty much almost a quarter of the population is over 65, you see a huge difference in the way seniors are taken care of. So the quality of life is way higher for elders. And I think cultural differences are like really have an impact on like the aging population in a country. And um, so I think that our job as youth is like we really need to be concerned with dementia and the stigma around it, like actively breaking that down because it has like really significant social and economic implications. Um, if these people aren't given like the care, like the attention in healthcare that they need, it can really overwhelm families and caregivers. Like most caregivers are just a family member, so it can break down like our towns, our families if people aren't given the like support they need. It's not just like the problem, it's not just like the elders' problem. It affects everyone who's around them. So I definitely think that even youth should be concerned with this because in 40 years we'll be the ones in that position like with the responsibility on our shoulders to take care of our aging like parents. And so if we don't take care of that, if we don't figure out how we can like provide support sustainably like Japan does, I think we're going to be in big trouble.
Mhm. And so I want to go back to the thing that you referenced with regards to maybe aging is frowned upon, especially in the United States. And so this can maybe be generalized as there's like an indifference towards the population, maybe living with dementia, and has led to a serious lack of resources put towards caring for these people. And so, how is the care that is given to people with Alzheimer's or dementia insufficient, and what are the effects of these inadequacies?
Yeah, great question. So, like I mentioned before, around 75% of caregivers are actually direct family members of the individual with the disease. And interestingly, a third are daughters. So, these statistics are much larger than other common diseases. And naturally, because of these statistics, there have been some very interesting studies on the disproportionate impact of dementia on family and unpaid caregiving to older adults as opposed to other illnesses. And the nature of this type of caregiving is especially demanding because someone always has to be aware of the person's like health, their location, and they have less time for themselves to dedicate to their own physical and mental health. Um, and these disparities are largely due to low rates of dementia diagnosis, lack of appropriate assisted living that is safe for people with mental or dementia, and also other issues related to stigma again within our society. And another thing about caregiving is that Alzheimer's is creating an economic crisis. It's one of the most expensive diseases in the nation. It costs us about $260 billion annually. Um, and federal funding for trying to find a cure is actually decreasing, which doesn't make any sense when you think about how the number of people with dementia will triple by 2050. So bringing awareness to this issue is really important because we're going to be in big trouble if we don't like turn that funding around. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue that we have to keep our eye on as the decades pass. And speaking of right now, as we mentioned at the start of the episode, COVID-19 has brought about changes in essentially every aspect of our society, and it's put a massive strain on our healthcare system. How has the pandemic impacted caretaking systems for those with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia specifically?
Yeah, so I think there are two kind of scenarios to look at when we're addressing this question. First off, people living in nursing homes and like memory facilities. There are a lot of people in these facilities, and with the current circumstances, their family aren't able to come and visit them. They can't have any visitors in and out, and this can create a lot of strain not only on the connection between the patient and their family, but also on that individual's mental health. And also, there are fewer resources and life enrichment opportunities for the people living in nursing homes. For example, I know that a lot of nursing homes around this area have like dance classes or have art classes. And the specialists who come in and teach these classes are no longer able to do so. So the day to day life of the people in these facilities might not be as entertaining or as stimulating. And especially, this can be problematic for individuals living alone. So, if someone is living alone or with one immediate family member, this makes it really difficult to get groceries, to get social interaction, and for the person who's caring for them, that it's difficult because they have to watch social distancing even more than they would have to originally. It's also harder and more risky for individuals to take walks and have conversations with neighbors. And I think we need to like address the fact that human interaction is so important for everyone's daily life. So when you're thinking about someone who maybe doesn't have as much interaction with other people, this is also still really, really important.
So now, as we're getting close to wrapping up the episode, I think it's important for our listeners to understand maybe what the mission of YMAA is, and specifically what are some of your goals and what plans do you guys have to reach them?
Yeah, so the nation as a whole and our chapter specifically, these are kind of our, I guess, goals. So we work to raise awareness and clarity about the disease. As we mentioned earlier, not a lot of people know about the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's and what those terms really mean. So that's something that we really try and work on to create that clarity. Also, we try and help reduce the stigma, as we were mentioning before. There is a lot of stigma with aging, and we like to address that head on and try and reduce that stigma. We also work to create intergenerational connections with high school students and college students and people with dementia and Alzheimer's. So we have been doing this through volunteering with memory facilities in our area. And also we've been writing letters and postcards to people to try and stay in touch over COVID. Also, we're working to raise money for research. We do different fundraisers throughout the year to send our money along to the Alzheimer's Association. We also volunteer with some Alzheimer's related fundraisers and organizations that are going around in town and in the area. We also reach out and we do some political campaigning for more federal funding. And unfortunately, our plans for in-person volunteering were cut short. But as I said before, we're working to create some pen pal initiatives with local care facilities. So hopefully we'll be able to continue volunteering in the fall and ensure that we are not putting anyone in danger.
It's great to hear what YMAA is doing, but I think some of our listeners might even be interested in taking action themselves after they've learned about the issues that we just examined. So, what options are available to anyone, even the average person who wants to help out the cause?
Well, first of all, just listening to this podcast is a great first step, so thanks so much. But also, becoming a dementia friend. So there's an organization called Dementia Friends. It actually, I think it started in Japan, but it's spread all over the world. And so we have statewide Dementia Friends MA. So it works to run information sessions, and then the participants become dementia friends after, and they get like counted on this counter on their website. So that they just become more knowledgeable about how to support those with dementia. So I would say DM Open Floor or Avery or myself on Instagram if you're interested in becoming a dementia friend, because we can hold a short virtual info session and it'll go into a little more depth on how to be more supportive to those with dementia in your community. But just more generally, educate yourself. So doing some research on the science and the statistics, because they can be super illuminating. Um, and then just trying to be a better ally for people with Alzheimer's. So anyone in your community, whether it's a neighbor, a grandparent, or even like a confused stranger in the grocery store who doesn't know, who might need your help, just reach out to someone you know living with dementia, write them a letter, give them a call, and try to brighten up their day and make some connections, because it's super important, especially right now. And after COVID-19, volunteering would be great. Writing letters, making art to send it to a facility. There's so many things you can do. You could just donate to the Alzheimer's Association. There's really so many things you can do to make a difference in your community. So, but yeah, great first step is listening to this episode.
Right. So now I think that we can wrap up our discussion here. And I just want to quickly mention that YMAA's website and any other resources that they provide will be in the show notes of this episode. And definitely either message us or message Lena or Avery, wherever you can find them, and ask them questions if you have them. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer. And so we covered some really crucial issues today, and you both offered some fantastic explanations and some valuable perspectives. And so with that being said, thanks again to Avery and Lena for coming on to this episode of Open Floor.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
for having us.
And with that, we conclude the 9th episode of Open Floor.
However, we still want to continue the discussion with you guys. If you have any thoughts on this episode and the topics discussed, please DM us on Instagram at Open Floor Podcast, or get in touch with us via our website, openfloor.mu/home.
Also, if you'd like to take a look at some useful resources for Alzheimer's and dementia, we'll leave a few in the description of this episode. I also want to thank Amin Purgol Mohammed for producing this and all of our episodes. I'm Ali Mosallai.
And I'm Aryan Narayan.
And until next time, thank you for listening to Open Floor.